Hello and welcome to the first ever online OpenValue meetup on YouTube. We are happy to present here from our studio in Utrecht. And tonight you can enjoy two talks, one about end-to-end testing with Cypress and the second one about multi-platform development with Kotlin. So you're not here to listen to me, but you're here to listen to and to watch our first speaker for tonight, and this is Jogchem Dijkstra.
Hi, let me take you on a quick tour through Cyprus. My name is Jogchem Dijkstra. I'm a developer for OpenValue. Yeah, let's say I'm specialized in Java, but I touch all the stuff. And today I want to show how I've used Cypress and how you might want to use it as well. So on the agenda, I'll first give a quick introduction about Cypress, what it is, what you can do with it. I'll show a few use cases, how I've used it and how colleagues of mine have used it. And that should only take a few minutes because then we get to the live coding. We'll go through one of the official Cypress tutorials very quickly, so you get a look at almost all the aspects of Cypress. And then hopefully we'll have some time for questions as well. So very quickly, what's Cypress? It's a tool for testing web applications, both through the UI, but you can also make backend calls, so you could test an API as well. The big advantage is that you write your code as if it's synchronous code, and then Cypress handles all the asynchronous mess. So like navigating to a page, it will wait for the page to load, and you don't have to do anything for that. And you don't have to use Selenium or WebDriver. Cypress talks directly to the browser, and that's also why not all browsers are supported. So when Cypress started, you could only use Chrome, but they're currently supporting Firefox, Electron, Edge, and Brave as well. So you shouldn't use Cypress to do a browser test and check compatibility against all the browsers. You should just use it to check if your application is working as expected functionally. And if you just want to get started, just do an npm install Cypress and npx Cypress open, and you get a basic set of tests that test against a test website of Cypress itself. So you can just have a look at the code and see how it works. And then when we have the test pyramid, you can use Cypress for all levels. So most people use it for end-to-end testing, just to click through an application, but you can also just boot up a few components and test those. And you can do component testing, and then you almost get into the terrain of unit testing because you're running tests against a single component. Then a few use cases. The first time I used Cypress was a few years ago at the CarePay organization, which is a Kenyan company that provides payment options for health insurance. And what we noticed is that there were a lot of different services. They weren't communicating with each other as expected. So we needed a way to test a whole flow through all those components, and we used Cypress for that. And the cool thing was as well that we used Cucumber to write the test scenarios, and then we used the same scenario for to run backend tests with JUnit and run the front-end tests with Cypress. And then, so that's more the end-to-end level. And currently I'm using Cypress mostly to automate my own work. So when I have to write a feature, I'll first create a quick throwaway test in Cypress. to go through the application, because often you think, oh well, this is just 3 clicks to test this, but then you keep switching to your browser, doing those 3 clicks, maybe navigating to a specific page. And of course, when you have a script, it just you can go to that page immediately, and you just see your tests running on a separate screen. And a colleague of mine is using it at bol.com to do component testing. So they have a test harness that will basically create a new page and deploy the component there, and then you run tests against that individual component. And then it's also used to run UI tests and check API calls as well. So that's it for the use cases, and then we can go to the fun stuff. And so you notice I'll be looking at my screen a lot because I just want to do some coding. We're going to use the official Cypress test React Todo App. So of course we're going to create a to-do application. And I've already cloned the repository, of course. So I'll start by running the application. And we'll automatically deploy. We'll check that we have it running. And if you want to go through the tutorial yourself, you can find it on the Cypress website. Okay, so what we have now is a very bare bones to-do application. And in the tutorial, you'll also see how to implement all the features in React. We're going to skip over that a bit and just look at how we would test it with Cypress. Now, if we look at our package.json, we already have Cypress as a development dependency. So we're going to run that. And there's 2 ways of running Cypress. Either when you're developing with a UI like this, you use open, but you can also run it from the command line, of course, and it just executes your tests. So you'd use that in a pipeline. We have one test which does nothing yet except navigating to the home page. So we see our application here. And now we're going to write our first test. Cypress puts the tests in or reads the test from the Cypress integration folder in your project. So we have a stub here. And what you do is just basic JavaScript test syntax. So we'll describe some functionality and then put some test cases in there. And what we want our application to do is to put focus on the input element when we load the page. So we visit our home page, and then we'll use Cypress to find the input element, which is a class new to do. And then we can create an assertion. And we say we want it to have focus. No, we're not doing semicolons here. So when I save this, it automatically reruns our test. And we see the steps on the left-hand side. And we see the visit went okay. And then it found the input element as well. So if we hover over the step, we can see what it matches. And then it doesn't assert and it wants it to be focused, but we also see no blinking cursor there. It doesn't have focus yet. So we need to fix our application. And this is the React bit. That's not that interesting. We'll just put autofocus here. Save it, and then when we rerun our test, we see a green assert. Easy. Then, of course, we also want to be able to type some text there. Let's should accept input. And of course, we have to visit again. And then we again need to get the new to-do element. And then we're going to type some text into it. And the API is pretty straightforward. When we want to type text, we just say type. And then we want to add a to-do item to learn Cypress. And now something that will seem a bit strange. I'm going to put a assert there. Because after I typed learn Cypress, I want the input box to have the value learn Cypress. And we'll get to why that's important in a bit. For now, I'll save it. And we see that Cypress has run both our tests. And if we want to put focus on a single test, we can say it only. And now we see it just runs the one test. So that's nice while developing. And then we can do some refactoring because we see we always want to visit the home page. So we'll add a before each. And then we want to visit our home page, and then we can remove it here and here. And if we run it again, and we look at our test scenarios, we can see the before each. It does a visit, and then the actual test scenario. And now we have a URL in here, hard-coded. We might want to put that in some external configuration. You can use cypress.json for that, or you pass it as a command line parameter, but we want this to be the default, and then you could change it at runtime. For example, run against a specific, the test against a specific test environment. And then here we can do, I think, and now we see it closed our test because we changed something in the environment variables, and then I didn't. Oh, the fun of live coding. Let's see if this is okay. Forget it. We're going to there we go. Of course, we don't need to put the base URL there. We just say visit the root path, and then we can see our test is working again. Okay. And now we have this assertion on the text that we just typed, which might seem a bit odd, but sometimes your application changes the text while you go. So for example, here we saved the text that was typed in the state of the component, or save the application. So say, for example, that we forgot to update the state on an input change. Now if we run our tests, we can see that it's found the element, it typed the text, but then the state was never updated, so the input doesn't show that value. And I've had it happen with application I was testing myself as well. that I first typed some text and then I selected something from a drop-down, and apparently that reloaded a part of the form, and my input text was gone. So it's always good to check your inputs. And now, of course, we want to see that we can actually create new to-do items. And what we've done now, this is all about the input element. But now we want to create a new context because we're talking about the form submission, and we want to keep that separate in our output. And we want it to add a new to-do item when we submit. So we get the element again, and we type some text. And then we're going to press the enter key, and yeah, there's some some magic strings you can use for like pressing the up key or any other non-printable. So going to hit enter, and then let's see if that's already working. So we visit, we get the element, we type learn Cypress, and then we hit enter, and we see it as this default form behavior of then reloading the current page. But of course, we wanted to make a backend call to create the item. In our application, we already have the code for that. So we can see that now when we run the test, it actually does a XML HTTP request, and we get a 404 and an error message. But for the test, we don't really care about the actual backend. We're just testing the front end for now. So we want to mock or stub the backend. For that, we can use Cypress server, and then we create a route for the backend call. And we're expecting a post to /API. Where are we? /todos. And then we want to stub the result. So what we're going to return is the name learn Cypress, and it has to have an ID as well. Let's give it 1. So now what Cypress will do is it will create a server to proxy all the XML HTTP requests. So now we see that where first we had a 404 because we didn't have the backend running, we now get a 200. And if we look in inside the inspector, we can actually see the call and the request object and the response. And we can see the response that we mocked here. So this is also a very nice way to test how your front end reacts to different responses, like 404s or 500s or whatever. You can just create a route and mock those. Now that we returned the to-do, we want it to show up in the list, of course. So we get the to-do list, and then all the list items in there. And of course, we've added one, so we can say it should have length 1. And also the new to-do input should have been cleared. So that should have value empty string. So we save and it gets run. And indeed we have the one item in the list, but the input isn't cleared yet. We're going to fix that in the application. And so what we wanted to do is when we get something, we wanted to clear the current to-do. And now the input gets cleared and everything is green again. And then, like I said, we can check for error responses as well, and see that it correctly shows the error message.
So before we do that, Jochem, we have some
Yes.
questions from the audience. So David is asking, how much abstraction do you use, given some of your elements may get a different attribute, for example, different class attributes? So do you add extraction layers like page objects or something, or what are good practices for handling these type of things?
Yeah, I guess it really depends on your application. What I do myself is I usually just create commands. We'll get to that in a bit in the tutorial as well. So you can actually extend the language of Cypress. So I can say, for example, in the application I'm currently working on, for some reason, sometimes you have to load the page twice to actually get it to work. So I just have a navigate to method, and then there I have a custom code to handle that behavior, and I have a click button command that knows how to find the button in that application and click it.
Yeah, so well, you're a consultant just like me, so the answer is always it depends, I guess. But
yeah,
it truly depends here.
It really depends on the application. The philosophy from Cypress itself is that if it's hard to test your application, you should change your application.
Sure. Yeah.
So what you often see is that they'll just create special data attributes on the inputs, so you can give it a very specific test-friendly handle and use that in your tests. Though you don't depend, because now we're depending on classes, but of course they might change. So it's better to introduce specific test identifiers.
Yeah. We have another question from Rachel. Rachel is asking, are typed assertion methods available, or is it only string-based?
Typed assertions are also available, and what you can do there is I think you can do a shoot and then have the element, and then you can just do when I have the correct syntax, you can just do expect to do, and then you have to have, etc. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. So David and Rachel, thanks for your questions. Please keep them coming. Ask them through the YouTube chat, and I will relay them to Jochem at the appropriate time.
Okay. So let's check the error message. So now what we're going to do is we're going to return an error code. For that we have to use a slightly different call of the route method, because now we have to specify some options. So I have a method and no, that's not called path, URL. And then we're going to return a status code, and we want to simulate a server error. So just returning status 500. And I have to specify response object as well. I'm just going to return an empty response. And then, well, we're going to get something to fill. So our to do is a failure. We're going to press enter. And then we shouldn't have any list items. So we want this to not exist. And we have an error element, and that should be visible. So there we go. And we see the status 500 being returned, and indeed we see a failed message. That's it for the creating an element and it failing. So now we're going to continue to checking that the app loads correctly, because of course there might already be some to-do items in the database, and we want those to show up. So we're going to create a new I don't think we want this. Oh well, let's skip through it. So what we can do is we can create a new test file, and we're going to describe the app initialization. And what we do here is we're going to seed our application. And this is now a custom command. So if we look in the Cypress support folder, we have a commands file. And here we're introducing a new command, seed and visit. And what it does, it loads data from a fixture file. It initializes the Cypress server. And then we'll have a route for the get API to-dos, and then we're going to return that data. And fixtures are put in the fixtures folder, of course. So here we have just a JSON file with the seed data. So if we look at our test scenario, we're going to seed it so that loads fixture, and then visit the home page, and then we want to see 4 items. So we're going to reload, and of course we want this to reload as well. And it doesn't want to show the new file. So let's restart it. And there we have it, the app initialization. And also, what's also nice is that in the output you can see that this call is stopped. So we know it's not an actual backend call. And then we have the 4 items. And then whenever we have a failure in the loading of the initial items, we want to see an error message as well. So we can check that. And here we see we stop the call, we get a 500, and we see an error message. Okay. Now what we're going to check is that the list items are displayed correctly. If they've been marked done, they should be crossed out. So what we're going to do is create a new test file. And it's gone. New file. Let's call that list items. And we're going to describe the list items. We already know that for every test we want to start with some test data, so we'll add it before each, and we'll start with a seed and visit. And then it should properly display completed items. So what we're going to do is we mark a to-do item as complete and then show that that renders correctly. So what we do is we go into our fixture and then we say by X that has been completed. And then when we load our data, we want to say that our list items, when we filter on the class completed, then that should have length 1. And then we can add other assertions by using AND. It should contain the word eggs, because that's what we marked done. And then there's a toggle element in there, in that list item, so we're going to find that and then say that that should be checked. So if now we run this test, we can see that the second item is crossed out, and we check that. Then we're going to, it should be able to remove items from the list as well. So we're going to test that. That should remove the to-do. So now we want to stop the delete call. And that's not supported by default, so we should create some options object. So say method is delete, and then you're going to delete the first item, and then we'll return status 200 and an empty response. So now when we going to select all the list elements, then we just want first. That's easy as invoking first. Then we're going to find the destroy button, and we're going to click it. Let's run this. And now we get a failure. Because what's happening is that the delete button is only showing up when we hover over the item. And in our test, when we find the element, it does find the destroy button, but it's not visible, so it doesn't want to click on it. And it tells you what's happening and how you can fix it. So there's two ways of fixing this in your test. It's either by making the element visible, or we can just force the click. But the nice thing is that by default, it won't interact with elements that are not visible. Because otherwise your test might pass, but then as a user you can't actually see the button that you need to click on. So for now we're just going to force the click. And now when we run, it can click the element, and it should actually have been removed now. Let's just add an assert for that. We're going to give the list an alias, so we can use the same get again. So we don't have to type the to-do list Lee here, but we can use the alias. And then it should have removed one item, so it should have length 3 now. And it should no longer contain the word milk. And that's broken, so let's see in our application if we actually handled the delete. We didn't do that yet, so we're implementing that. Now we rerun our test, and we can see the item was removed.
We have some questions, Jochem.
Yes.
So Bart is asking, what is your strategy with maintaining your Fixture files? So with growing apps, these things can get out of control in his experience. Do you have any advice to handle this?
Try to use them not too often. There's an example in the tutorial as well. So try to just mock the data in place for a specific test case, not depend on Fixture files too much, because they tend to get shared between test scenarios as well, and they'll start to interfere. But yeah, it's a problem. So for CarePay, we also set up a few classes to basically store state within the test. And use that.
Yeah, I think that's also kind of where David's next question is about. He is asking, does Cypress allow you to make your stubs dynamic? So can you control your stubs from your Cypress code? I guess if you can control them over JavaScript, then you can control them from Cypress as well.
It's just JavaScript code, so yeah, you can just create some classes to manage state. But yeah, you have to be careful, because you don't want to depend on external state too much for your tests to run.
Yeah, maybe you could initialize your mocks at the start of the test, etc.
Yeah.
Okay. And then Dennis states, dealing with business rules where dates are involved is also a bit of a pain. Do you feel his pain?
Yeah, dates are horrible. Luckily, I myself haven't used those with Cypress yet, because we didn't have that at CarePay, and currently I'm just writing throwaway tests. So if a date is involved, I'll just put it a month away if it needs to be in the future, and I know my feature will be released before then, and then it's fine. Yeah, one thing is that Cypress bundles a few utility libraries, so like underscore, but also moment. So you can use moment.js to do date manipulation.
Okay, thanks. So that's it for the questions for now.
Okay. Okay, let's just continue. Forget about the failing tests because that's just the demo gods interfering. So now it's all green again. So what we're going to do now is to see that we can actually toggle the items and mark them completed. So in our list item file, going to create a new test case. And we want to mark an item that's not complete yet. And then it should be complete. Now, for that, we have a backend call as well to actually update the state of the item. What we want to do is now be in control which item is complete, because we're not. What we did the other time was mess around in the fixtures file, but other tests might depend on that. So let's not do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to load the fixture here. I can just use the file name without JSON. Then we get a promise, and we can do stuff with the loaded list. And then we'll get an element from that list. And here we can see that we can use underscore JS, just like so. And we'll get the head of the to-dos list. And then we're going to create a route that handles the change of that item. So when we get a put on, and we're going to use the actual ID. So now we are protected from changes in the fixtures file, and then we're going to return. Going to merge, going to get that same to-do item, and then we're going to set is complete to true. So now whatever the data in the fixtures file is, this should work as marking it complete. So now we're going to get the items again. We're going to get the first element and give it an alias. So we can do a check on it later. So with that first to-do item, we're going to find the toggle element. We're going to click it. And then we're going to check that after clicking it, it should be checked. And then now we did some logic on the toggle element. So everything after this line is about the toggle button and or checkbox. But now we want to say something about the actual to-do item again. So here we say it should get a class completed. And then, of course, We have a failing test because our application code is not implemented yet. So we have some very ugly code here to handle the toggling of an element. And now when we rerun the test, it should have been green. So, okay, what we can see here is that the put actually returns 404. So we didn't stop it correctly. And what's the problem there? I'll just skip to the next bit if this is too complicated. That does have ID 1. Okay. Wrong quotes. So there we go. Now the item is crossed out. And we have a bug in our code, and we're not going to fix that because that takes too long for this session. So we're just going to skip ahead. And so I'd advise you to do the tutorial yourself, because the first time they introduce this code, you think, why? And then, of course, they're going to fix it to some cleaner and better code. So on to the last bit. Yeah, and what I also didn't show you just now is that you can very easily put a debugger statement within, for example, an assertion or a Cypress command, and then your debugger will pause, and then you can inspect the situation as it is at that point in the test. So that helps with debugging the actual application as well. So now what we have in our application is we have this this footer that shows some information about the to-dos, and you can filter on only the active or the completed items. And so let me just show you those. Oh, cool. Let's just show you those texts. So what we did with that seed and visit command was that we added a parameter where you can just specify your own list of items. So here we don't depend on that fixture. We just say, okay, we have the one item, and we can check that in the footer it says there's one to-do left. And then we do some checks on multiple to-dos as well. And here we have a pattern of having parameterized tests. So what we do is we want to check a few different cases. So for those different filter links, we know how many items we expect. So we can use those as parameters. And then we'll use Cypress wrap that basically pulls this list into a Cypress context. And then we can do an each on that and then run Cypress commands for every item. And you shouldn't do filters dot for each. Because the whole magic of Cypress is that it makes this synchronous looking code, turns it into asynchronous code, and when you mix actual normal JavaScript synchronous code with Cypress, everything will fill. So that's it for the live coding. Any questions?
Yes, we have questions. I think one final question from David. He's asking, did you run into any incompatibility with libraries like Vue or Backbone? You know, if you need to hook into some asynchronous view processor or something. What's your experience there?
Not compatibility issues per se. So currently I'm running it against a Wicked application, and there the forms are often reloaded in place. And what you can do there is create a route without a response object, and then Cypress will just listen for that request, and then you can actually wait on it. So we didn't. That's not in this tutorial, I think, but I use that a lot. That I know that, for example, selecting an item from a drop-down, it will change the form. Then I can actually wait for that backend request to be made, and only then start getting items from that form.
Yeah, so probably this is mostly solved by waiting on an element to appear, a backend to call to be made, etc.
Yeah. And often Cypress does all these waits automatically. So if you visit a page, it will wait for the page to be loaded. If you get an element by a label, for example, by default it will wait for 4 seconds for that element to show up, because it might be loaded asynchronously. So there's a lot of sensible defaults in there. You can increase that limit as well for a specific call or the timeout. What you should never have to do is wait for 1 second, for example, because that will make your tests run incredibly slow and slower all the time. But what you can do is wait for an actual backend request to have happened. And that way it runs as fast as it can.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jochem. Thanks also to our audience for participating and asking questions.
Thanks
if you have any more questions, feel free to ask them over the chat. We will do a short break, and now we'll be back in 5 to 10 minutes, so expect the next talk to start around 8 o'clock local time. Thanks a lot, and see you back in a bit.
Okay, bye-bye.
So hi everyone, and welcome back to our online live meetup. This is the second talk that's going to be presented by Stefan Kemp. And Stefan is going to talk about multi-platform development with Kotlin. So please, Stefan, take it away.
Thank you, Betjan. So, hi guys. Let's start first with a very short story. Let's assume that I am hired by an external company. And that company has a brilliant idea. It is crazy. It's new. It's about making a social media platform on which you can share videos. And it's short videos, videos of like a 10-second length. And those videos can be shared across with your friends, basically. And your friends can like those videos, can leave comments on those videos. And once I was invited to join on birthday. You know probably how it goes. You are asked, hey Stefan, do you for a living? And then the exciting part begins, right? Because the one that asks you that question has no technical background, and how are you going to explain him what you are doing? So usually I ask for a piece of paper and a pen, and I start drawing on the paper what I'm doing. And it could look like this, basically. I have drawn an Android application for our Android users that we are targeting with our social media platform. The same for iOS and for everyone else who are using browsers or behind the laptop. We have a browser app running as well. And I also explained that those three platforms, those three apps, are all connected to a backend. And the backend is storing all our videos and is giving us a timeline with all the videos from our friends. And as we continue our talk, I also explained to him that it's not just one Scrum team that is actually working on this, but there are many more Scrum teams. So together with that and all the teams that are working on the platform, we have quite some business logic that we are building with each other, right? It's growing, the app is growing, it's getting more popular, people are using it, and as we are developing our business logic, we will also encounter that we have some duplication. That's mainly also because we don't have a single code base. So all the business logic that we write has to be duplicated across those apps. And as also the complexity grows over time, we have more maintenance. And having more maintenance means basically that also our costs will grow. And usually my experience is that the manager at the company, who's mainly looking at the Excel sheet, is basically seeing that, hey, it's getting too expensive. It slows us really down, right? We have so much duplication and maintenance that it will really hurt us to be competitive in the market. So what will happen? The manager tells the developer to come up with a solution, and the developer, of course, as how it goes, says, hey, no worries, we'll come up with something. Well, I have visited, for example, last year a conference, and I saw a talk about Flutter. I read a blog post. It's about React Native, and I heard a colleague telling me about Ionic, which is also awesome to maybe look at. And there are many more frameworks, SDKs out there, which we can use to reduce the complexity, reduce the duplication. And those frameworks have in common basically is that there's just one single code base. And from that single code base we can generate our applications, and by having a single code base we have less duplication. And with less duplication there's also less maintenance. That in the end also means that we have low costs, especially on the long term, because if we did that transition to the new architecture by supporting new framework, it will lower the cost because of having a single code base and there's less maintenance. But how about the programming language? For example, for Flutter we have to use Dart. And for React Native we'll be using JavaScript, which is probably fine because we already have a web app running. But for Ionic we'll be using TypeScript. Now TypeScript on itself is not so very different than JavaScript. It's more type safety, so we'll be fine with that. But that is something that you'll have to keep in mind. Also important is that we had that backend service running in the background, and it might be interesting to also share code not only in the front end but also in the background. So things that you can think about are probably something like validation rules. So you have to log in, or you have to make an account. So there's some validation on, for example, the password complexity. And those rules should be shared across your entire architecture as well. The third critical question that raises is if you could really use the latest mobile SDK feature. And it depends basically on the framework that you'll be choosing in the previous slide. But if you are depending on the vendor to first update its own framework or SDK before you can use the latest biometric possibilities in iOS, or maybe the augmented reality SDK that is released in Android, then you might also have an issue. The last critical question is about the native user experience. So not every framework or SDK in my previous slide is actually compiling to a native user interface. So the question raises, what is better, right? If you would ask a native developer, he would say always go for a native user interface, because that responds better, it feels better, it's faster, so go for that. So that's what you have to keep in mind as well. And actually those 4 points might be covered by Kotlin Multiplatform Mobile. So before I go into details and explain what Kotlin Multiplatform is and what Kotlin Multiplatform Mobile is, let's introduce myself first. So my name is Stefan Kemp. I'm working for OpenValue as a full stack developer, and I love the craftsmanship of software development. And I've been doing that for a while now. And I've been working with backends, writing in the Java programming language. I've been working with Android applications, iOS applications, and lately also with websites. And this is also my very first meetup. Exciting to be here, to tell you more about Kotlin. So if you have feedback, leave that also in the chat. I'll read that afterwards, so that I can improve myself as well. So I'm working for OpenValue, and I know that there are some OpenValue colleagues in the stream watching over here as well, and they should be scared now because I'm going to show them a couple of pictures, but that will be later. We have once a year a hack weekend, actually a couple of days. And during those days we are allowed and can work on projects that we love to work on. And that are usually projects on which you don't have time during the weekdays with the customer. And during those days you can play around with, for example, artificial intelligence, or do something with machine learning, or maybe you have some Raspberry Pis at home that you would like to try out. And the main thing here is that it needs to be fun. And last year we went to Belgium, so we had a hack and bike. But this year, because of COVID, we stayed in Holland with the company, so we had a hack in Hollandia. And this is how it looks, basically. This is Bert-Jan.
So who's there pretending he knows how a soldering iron works?
He is doing some stuff with hardware. During that weekend, there was also Formula 1, and I'm a big Formula 1 fan, so we did put the race on the screen itself, and we've been watching Formula 1 with the group, and that was fun as well. Yeah, it was not, the race itself is not really, it wasn't a good race because Max Verstappen, for example, didn't even make turn 8 or turn 4 because he crashed, so it was quite boring, but that's how it goes, I think. We also have some colleagues that are quite sportive, so they went out on the bike and did a ride of like 150 kilometers. Really respect for them, of course, that they can manage to do that. This is me sitting in the grass.
In your natural habitat, I would say, Stefan.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this feels comfortable. This is really cool. And yeah, I had several things to look into. And during actually the last days of our hack in Hollandia, a colleague told me about Kotlin Multiplatform Mobile. And yeah, that's actually how it started for me. So I was curious what it was. Yeah, Kotlin Multiplatform Mobile. That's where it began for me. And yeah, when you search on the internet, because you are curious what it actually is, you'll be maybe yeah, you will be finding this blog post by Ekaterina. It's published in the end of August. Actually, it's more September. And she is actually sharing that Kotlin Multiplatform Mobile with the world in the alpha status. And that's a very nice article. So I actually did a copy paste of a snippet from that article. Let's read it out. It's about Kotlin Multiplatform Mobile. It's an SDK for cross-platform mobile development provided by JetBrains. It uses the multi-platform capabilities of Kotlin and includes various tools and features designed to make end-to-end experience of building mobile cross-platform applications as enjoyable and efficient as possible. So that's quite some text, and let's zoom in a little bit. So it's an SDK for cross-platform mobile development. It's using the multi-platform capabilities of Kotlin, and according to her, it's enjoyable and efficient. So I'm also curious after the presentation how you look at it. For me, it was at least very enjoyable to play around with it. So multi-platform capabilities. I don't really have a lot of experience with Kotlin. Actually, during our Hack in Hollandia, it was the very first time that I did something with Kotlin. So I basically also learned a new language. It was fun, but yeah, next to that, the article itself had a lot of questions for me. This one raised out as well, because multi-platform capabilities, Kotlin, what is that? So if you search on the internet, Google knows the answer, of course. You probably find this diagram. It's on the page from Kotlin itself, on the documentation pages, and it explains it actually pretty well what Kotlin multiplatform is. All the magic basically happens in the center. Over there we have Common Kotlin. Common Kotlin is basically including the Kotlin language itself and some core libraries. And there's something very important about this, because Common Kotlin, the code written over there, should work on all platforms. That is basically the rule. And if you follow that, you will be fine. Next we have in the second ring Kotlin Gvm, Kotlin GS and Kotlin Native. And those are platform-specific versions of Kotlin, and they include an extension of the Kotlin language, and are basically forming also a bridge to the native code, for example, which is in this third ring. Or if you are using Kotlin Gvm, you can access the Gvm code itself. So if you want, you can use the classes in the util package. And for Kotlin GS, you can actually access everything what is available within the browser. So you can interact with the window object or the navigator and play around and do things with that. And this is actually the very basic overview of Kotlin multiplatform itself. Ooh, this looks awful. Let's fix it. Here we go. So which platforms are actually supported by Kotlin multiplatform? Well, we have already seen Kotlin Gvm, and we have seen Kotlin GS, but then there are a bunch of other platforms, and those are basically grouped by Kotlin itself to be Kotlin native. So from the previous slide I was talking about Kotlin native. Well, those are the platforms that belong to Kotlin native. So that is Android, iOS, watchOS, tvOS, macOS, Linux, Windows, and even WebAssembly. So that's quite some list, and that basically means that you can, in your single source code, target each one of them if you want. So that's pretty cool. And you might be wondering now how that looks. So what we are going to do, we'll be switching to IntelliJ. Here we go. And we are going to create a new project. Here we go. Over here, we are selecting Kotlin, the language. And in the middle, let's make it a little bit bigger. Here we go. We see that there's a section that's called multi-platform. And over here, for this demo, we are going to select library. And the project GDK will be version 14 for now. We'll go to the next slide. And this is basically what will be generated if I click the finish button. And over here, I can tweak the targets a little bit. So we'll be going to create a library, and the library consists of the common, that is the circle, inner circle in the middle of the diagram. the GVM target, the browser itself, so the Kotlin GS, and native. And for native, I'm going to change the template to native application so that I'm able basically to run the native code on my computer. Otherwise, it will do nothing because it's a library. So let's leave everything else as default and finish. And now IntelliJ will generate a project for us. It says it is already existing. Let's start over. There we go. So I'm going to give it a new name. Not Untitled, but it is OpenValue Meetup. Library project DDK is number 14. And I'm changing the template for native to native application, finishing it. Also already exists. We will see what we get. This doesn't look good. Let's try it one more time. It's in alpha status, so it is expected. New version. Here we go. This should work. I've never done this before. So next, changing the template again. Finish. There we go. This looks more promising. Let's wait till Gradle finish the build.
If it doesn't work the first time, then it's not worthy of an alpha version, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it really proves that it's an alpha version. It's okay. So we have our project now. It's different than we saw earlier. So what did we get in IntelliJ? So there's a build Grader file. Let's go down over here. And the first thing that you can notice is that we will be using the Kotlin Multiplatform plugin in our build Gradle file. Next, there's a bunch of things which are less important, but over here in Kotlin we'll be actually defining the targets that we have for our multi-platform. So first we have GVM. Obviously, we also have a target for JavaScript, the GS. And finally, there's some more complex code, but this is for the native target. Based on the operating system on which your machine is running, there's some dynamic code over here. So it is trying to, based on the operating system, see which native target it should be. So it can be either Windows, macOS, or Linux. Over here, if we scroll down a little bit, there are the source sets defined. And these are basically also the directories that you'll be seeing in the source directory. So we have common GS, GS main, GVM main, and native main. And if you have some dependencies specifically for GVM, for example, you can add it over here. This is basically for the test. But this is actually what you have to look into if you have platform-specific dependencies. So back on the left side, we have the common main, which is empty. Same for JavaScript, GVM, and native main. And what we are going to do is we are making a generator, an Uuid generator. And for that we have to need a generator class. Here we go. And over here we declare a function which returns a string, and we can say my very cool UID. Here we go. This is it for now. So in the common we are done, and we can basically in the other projects now call the function which is in common. So in JavaScript we'll be making a class just in a Kotlin file. Let's call it main. And the function is also called main. And over here we are going to have a print line, which is saying hello. This is the Kotlin JS target, and another print line to actually print the generated UUID. Because it's all Kotlin, we can copy paste the main file to the Gvm target. We are going to change the first print to Kotlin Gvm. And for native main, there is already a main file, so we are going to update it a little bit to also generate the UUID for us. So let's start with running the native main project. It's getting confusing maybe. This takes a while. Okay, and in the output we see that the hello Kotlin native is printed with my very cool UUID. Same thing, of course, for the Gvm target. Let's run that as well. Here we go. But this is the output for the Gvm target. For JavaScript, it's a little bit different because we have to make a build first. So I'm going to do that right now. Let's build it. And the Kotlin JS platform specific version will actually now in my build folder in the JS directory in packages OpenValue meetup new version, which is the name of my project. In Kotlin write as an output the JavaScript, which is generated. And over here, if I inspect it, you'll be seeing that the generate UUID function is here. But we also have that main function that I've been making in my main Kotlin file. So this is pure JavaScript basically, and there's some boilerplate around, which is basically calling my my main function. So I can now run this JavaScript file with Node, and I'll be seeing the output over there, which is saying, hey, this is the JavaScript target and my very cool UUID. Yeah, and this is actually the very basic, the very basic Kotlin Multiplatform project that you can have. And it looks like this. We have just created a common main project. We also have a Gvm main, JavaScript main, and a bunch of native main targets. And as you can see, they all extend basically from common main. So the trick is that every of all the business logic that you want to share, that is what you want to put in common main, and everything else can then be reused. So this also raises the question: what if you have platform-specific APIs that you want to access from the common code? This is something that happens quite frequently, because not everything, you cannot solve everything just within our common code. Sometimes you need some interface or some logic which is only available in the Gvm code, etc. So like the Kotlin boys actually have a solution for that. They came up with the expected and actual declarations. This is also in beta. So yeah, let's see how that goes. But it basically looks like this. In our common project, we are declaring that we expect a function or a class. It doesn't really matter. And in the target, like iOS or Android, we must implement the function itself with the actual keyword in front. And over there, we can use the native libraries or use the Gvm libraries. It depends on what you actually need for a use case. So we are again wondering how that works. Let's go back to the EDA.
We have a question in between, Stefan. Yep. A question about you showed Gradle to perform the build. Can you use Maven as well?
Good question. Let's check it out right now. I don't think so, because the only supported options are Gradle Kotlin and Gradle Groovy. And as you can see, Maven is disabled. So I think maybe it's the alpha status and it will be supported later. But for now, only Gradle is supported.
Yeah, it might depend on some plugins maybe that are not there for the Maven ecosystem yet.
Exactly.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so back to our example. We are going to refactor our generate UUID function by having that expect actual declaration. So I am putting expect as a keyword before the function. That also means that I cannot implement the function over here, so I remove the implementation itself. And you see that my EDA now starts complaining. It's saying that the expected function is not there in the target GS main, and the same for Gvm main, and the same for native main. And that makes sense, right? Because it's expected, but I haven't done anything else. So we'll be implementing that. Let's start first with the JavaScript implementation. We'll be using the help of IntelliJ to generate the actual function in our GS main target. And over here, I can say, for example, let's make use of the date, the date object which is available in the browser. And I'm going to get, for example, the time, which is in double, and I have to do a toString to conform to the interface, just for demo purposes, to enable me to basically get an UUID in JavaScript. So that is one error less. Let's do the same thing for Gvm, but instead of having dependency on the date, we'll be using the UUID class from the Java util package, which is only available in the Gvm target. And let's see. This is the, oh, there we go. And we also have to call toString on that. So over here we'll be using the UUID from the Java util package. You might know what is coming about for the native code. Let's use the NSUUID, which comes from the Platform Foundation package. And let's see, that is the UUID string function, which I have to call. And this will basically generate a UUID with using the NSUUID class from the Platform Foundation package. So let's close it all. My error is gone because I've actually implemented all the functions. And let's start again with the native code. There we go. This is the output. The first compile seems to be longer than the second run. So if I keep running it, I will get a different UUID. Same thing, of course, for the Gvm target. Let's run it as well. We'll be getting different UUIDs. And for the JavaScript target, I have to make a build again. So IntelliJ is helping me out here. Let's wait for that. Go down the directory path to my generated JavaScript. And you'll be seeing that the generate UUID function, which was expected before in common, now actually contains the implementation itself as it is actually being implemented. So there's no weird things going on over there. I can run it just for the demo. you'll be seeing that there's a timestamp of the date printed. And that is basically how you could use the expect actual declarations in your code to fall back to the target itself to solve complex issues.
So we have another question, Stefan. Question from Dan. Do you write the native Kotlin code in this project, or is the native code generated like the JavaScript code?
It is generated, yeah. So in the, let's see, in the build directory, you will also see that there's an, let's see, where is it? Over here, I think this is the generated file for, I think, iOS, for the macOS.
Thanks.
Yeah. So back to the Kotlin Multiplatform mobile. We've been learning about Kotlin Multiplatform, how the basics are. Let's see how that works for mobile then. Well, for mobile, they are actually depending on the same way of working as for Kotlin Multiplatform itself. So this diagram, on the bottom, you're seeing shared code. And in the shared code, just like for Kotlin Multiplatform, you can implement your business logic. And if there's a need for that, you can actually fall back with the expect actual declarations to use iOS-specific APIs or Android-specific APIs. And that together is the shared code that you can use in the native code on top. So we will see that also in a minute, and we are going for our third demo. But the native app that we are going to make is just built in Swift. Swift is one of the languages for making an iOS app, basically. And for Android, we will be using Kotlin. And those two projects are depending on the shared code, where we have that business logic that is shared. So, yeah, I already said it. Let's make an Android and iOS app that has some shared business logic. There we go. We are not using IntelliJ for this demo. We'll be using Android Studio. Okay, so the first thing that you have to know, you have to install Android Studio 4.1, and there needs to be a plugin installed that is called Kotlin Multiplatform Mobile. If you have those two on your machine, you're probably ready to go to make a multi-platform mobile project. And we can do so by selecting Create New Project. And as a project template, we'll be scrolling down and you will see that the Kotlin Multiplatform Mobile template is there. We'll go for that. Next, we should give it a name, like OpenValue Meetup. The package name is fine. The same for the location where the project is stored. The minimum SDK is API 16. So with that we are supporting like 99.8% of the devices. We'll select next. Over here we'll be having an option to change the name of the Android module. Same for iOS or the shared module. This is also something that can break, because if you put the name over here that contains spaces, then we are able to continue to the next step to finish it, but in the generation itself will fail. So let's hope that that will be fixed later to have some proper validation on that. So we'll be using the defaults over here. And let's generate our project. Let's wait till Gradle is finished. Shouldn't get too long. It's finished. the indexing part can continue in the background. We'll be switching to the project overview, and let's see what we've got. So first is the shared directory, and the shared directory has basically the same build Gradle file as if we've seen in the previous example, and over here the Kotlin Multiplatform plugin is defined. Over here you also see that we have two targets over here. It's the Android target and the iOS target. And well, we have a bunch of source sets. So we have the common source set over here, the Android source set, and we have the iOS source sets. So in the source directory, same thing actually, right? It's the Android, common, and iOS. And this this project template that I've been using comes with some some generated code. So there's a greeting class that is that has a function greeting that says hello, and it's using the platform class to call the platform property on, and it's actually next to the greeting class. And this is an example of how it looks if you have an expected class. So the common main over here expects that the class platform is magically there, and that the platform class has the platform property defined. So let's go to Android main in our shared directory, and of course it's implemented over here. So this is the actual class platform with the actual platform property. And as you can see, it is importing from the Android OS package the build class, which contains a version constant that is having the SDK int over there. So this is basically telling us the SDK version on which the app will be running. And for iOS, the same thing, the actual class. We are still in Kotlin, of course, but over here we're importing the UI device class. We'll be giving the platform property the system name and the system version. It is the iOS way of showing which platform we are on. So some basic code, basically not something new. But this is where also the exciting part comes in, because there's also an Android app and an iOS app directory. And not sure if you did some Android development lately, but this is also what you will get if you generate an Android project. So there's an Android manifest over here, which contains the application, some details about the application, also some details about the activity. I can do whatever you want. I can give the activity a name, for example, like OpenValue meetup. That all works fine. There's a REST directory, which contains the XML files for my activity and for the colors and styles that this sample application is using. And the main activity, which is in the Java directory, it's a bit confusing, but that's how it goes, I guess. We'll be seeing the main activity that implements an onCreate function, and this basically loads the view itself. The view, let's inspect that for a minute. It says some XML that contains a text view. So we are getting a reference to the text view over here, and we are setting the text property to our greeting message, right? So the greeting itself over here is actually imported from the NL OpenValue Meetup shared package. So that comes from the shared folder we have seen before. So that also means that in the build file, there's a dependency on the shared project, as you can see. So when we are starting our app, this is the Android emulator. Okay, so this is our Android app. It shows the hello message, the greeting with the platform 29, and that works perfectly fine. So let's switch to the iOS app. This is how it looks. My Android Studio. Yeah, you can of course open the Swift files, but that Android Studio doesn't know how to handle that. So we'll be using Xcode, just Xcode, to open the iOS app. Here we go. I go to the OpenValue meetup directory. We open the iOS project file, which is generated as also. This is Xcode. In the top left, you'll see the iOS app. I'll click on that, and then you can see all the properties regarding to the iOS app. In the framework section, this is basically the dependencies, as you know, for as we have seen for in Gradle. So we're depending on the shared framework. And then in the content view, that is actually where the magic happens. We see that the greeting class is created, and we are calling the greeting function on that, and that returns a string. That string is set via this way on the view, and that's basically it. Let's run it. Instead of going for the iPod Touch, we'll be going for the iPhone 11 Pro Max. It's not the latest anymore, because we have the iPhone 12s nowadays. The emulator is starting. Here we go. Okay, and this is our greeting message. Hello, iOS 14. And let's go back to Android Studio. Let's make a quick change in our shared code. We are going to change the platform. Over here, let's say hello, this is my very first meetup. Typo, save it, back to it, make a new build. We build, that works itself, and when the app is run, then we'll see our message. So that works actually pretty well. Let's go back to the presentation. Because is multi-platform mobile then the golden bullet for your project, you might be wondering.